Chapter 1. The Rooms Where Nothing Happened. In the city of Aramore, there were certain rooms where nothing ever seemed to happen. They were rooms designed to feel weightless, suspended above consequence. High glass towers overlooking the river. Private dining halls lit in amber and gold. Conference suites where polished tables reflected the skyline so perfectly that the city appeared upside down beneath itself. Inside those rooms, voices were measured. Laughter was restrained. Deals were spoken softly as if loud words might stain the air. And in nearly all of them, at some point, Victor Hale stood comfortably at the center. If you asked anyone who he was, you would receive an answer polished smooth by repetition. Philanthropist, investor, advisor, benefactor. His name appeared engraved in metal outside hospital wings and etched into stone plaques beside scholarship programs. He sponsored youth initiatives. He funded technology incubators. He chaired ethics panels at universities that bore his donations. He moved through Aramore not like a king, not like a celebrity, but like infrastructure. Something built into the city's foundation. Permanent, necessary, unquestioned. At 37, Daniel Mercer understood infrastructure. He worked in communications for Governor Elaine Whitaker, a woman respected for her pragmatism and admired for her restraint. Daniel's job was to manage narrative, to shape public understanding before misunderstanding could take root. He was good at it. He had a talent for silence. Silence was an art. It required knowing which facts to emphasize, which to soften, and which to allow to dissolve in the background. It required calm under pressure, a steady pulse. Most mornings, Daniel woke at 6:10 a.m. without an alarm. The habit had developed years earlier during campaign season and never left. He lay still for a moment, listening. The house breathed quietly around him. From down the hall came the faint rustle of his daughter, Nora, turning in her sleep. Beside him, Elisa's breathing was slow and even. There was comfort in routine, predictability. He would rise carefully, shower, dress in pressed charcoal or navy. He preferred neutral colors, ones that did not distract or announce. In the kitchen, he brewed coffee while reading early news briefs on his tablet. Headlines scrolled in measured tones. Policy debates, budget negotiations, economic forecasts. Nothing dramatic. Aramore prided itself on stability. The river that cut through the city was wide and deliberate, never rushing. Bridges arched over it in careful symmetry. The skyline had grown taller in recent years, but not chaotic. Controlled expansion like a corporation diversifying thoughtfully. Daniel sometimes thought of the city as a carefully curated biography. Everything placed in the correct order. On Thursday evenings, the governor's office often hosted private dinners with donors and advisors. These gatherings were not officially on the calendar. They did not require press coverage. They were meant for alignment, strategic conversations in environments that felt relaxed enough to encourage candor. It was at one of these dinners 2 years earlier that Daniel first stood within arm's reach of Victor Hale. The restaurant had been closed to the public. Heavy curtains drawn. The lighting low enough to flatter every face in the room. Victor arrived 10 minutes late, not enough to offend, just enough to be noticed. He entered without entourage, though 2 men lingered near the door afterward. He wore a simple dark suit, impeccably tailored. No tie. His hair was silver at the temples in a way that looked deliberate rather than inevitable. The governor greeted him warmly. "Victor," she said, extending her hand. "Always a pleasure." "The pleasure is mutual," he replied, voice smooth, modulated. "Your administration has been refreshingly decisive." Daniel observed from the side, tablet in hand. When introduced, Victor studied him a fraction longer than necessary. "Ah," Victor said. "You're Mercer. You handle messaging." "Yes, sir." "Important position." His lips curved faintly. "Truth is malleable. It needs someone careful to shape it." Daniel smiled politely. The comment unsettled him in a way he could not immediately define. During dinner, Victor spoke less than others, but when he did, the table quieted. He asked questions that seemed generous but were precise in their intent. What obstacles are you facing with the transportation bill? Which legislators remain hesitant? What narratives resonate best with suburban districts? It was not interrogation. It was calibration. Daniel noticed something else too, the way other powerful people leaned slightly toward Victor, as though drawn by gravity. Business executives, senior advisors. Even the governor listened with particular attention. Victor did not demand space. Space opened for him. Later that night, as Daniel reviewed his notes in the dim office light, he tried to articulate what had unsettled him. It was not arrogance. Victor was too controlled for that. It was certainty. a certainty so complete it left no visible cracks. At home, Elise asked how the dinner went. Predictable, Daniel said, loosening his collar. Fundraising commitments. Strategic alignment. And Victor Hale? She asked casually. Daniel paused only briefly. Influential. Elise leaned against the counter, studying him. I've heard his name mentioned at the clinic, she said. Daniel looked up. In what context? Nothing specific, she replied. Just tension. Elise worked as a therapist at a non-profit counseling center. Her days were filled with stories that rarely made headlines. Quiet grief, buried trauma, private fear. What kind of tension? Daniel asked. She hesitated. A former client mentioned working for one of his foundations. She left abruptly. Wouldn't say why. Foundations can be intense, Daniel offered. High expectations. That's not what I meant. There it was again, something undefined. Daniel brushed it aside. In his world, rumors were currency. They circulated constantly, attached to every powerful name. Most dissolved under scrutiny. Some were planted deliberately. If there were real misconduct, he reasoned, investigators would act. The system had safeguards. Had to. Weeks passed. Spring arrived in Aramore with disciplined beauty, trees budding along the riverwalk, cafe tables reappearing on sidewalks. Campaign season approached, bringing renewed energy to the governor's office. Victor's presence became more frequent. He attended policy roundtables. He hosted private fundraisers in his penthouse overlooking the water. His philanthropic foundation announced a multi-million-dollar expansion of a youth mentorship program. At one such fundraiser, Daniel found himself on the balcony, briefly alone. The city stretched below in orderly lines. Boats moved slowly across the river. The air smelled faintly of jasmine from decorative planters. Victor stepped beside him without sound. Beautiful view, Victor said. Yes, Daniel replied. Perspective matters, Victor continued. From up here, everything looks contained. Manageable. Daniel nodded. Victor rested his hands lightly on the railing. People misunderstand power, he said thoughtfully. They think it's loud, obvious, but real influence is quiet. It's about shaping environments so that outcomes feel inevitable. Daniel felt a chill despite the mild air. I suppose that's true, he said carefully. Victor turned his pale gray eyes toward him. You understand inevitability, don't you? He asked. Daniel did not know how to answer that. Inside, laughter rose from the main hall. Glasses clinked. Applause followed a speech Daniel had helped craft. Victor smiled faintly and returned inside. Daniel remained on the balcony a moment longer. He told himself he was being dramatic. That discomfort was natural around powerful personalities. That his imagination was filling gaps with shadow. But later, as he drove home across the bridge, he noticed something peculiar. From the center of the span, the river reflected the city lights in perfect symmetry. Above and below identical, bright towers mirrored in dark water. Yet he knew the reflection was fragile. One disturbance, a passing boat, a gust of wind, would fracture the illusion instantly. At home, Nora was asleep with a book open on her chest. Elise sat beside her, brushing hair from her forehead. Daniel watched them quietly from the doorway. There, in that small lamplit room, the world felt honest, stable. He leaned against the frame and allowed himself to believe that whatever unease lingered around Victor Hale was merely perception, a byproduct of proximity to power. After all, Victor was celebrated, respected, trusted by institutions that vetted carefully. Hospitals did not accept money blindly. Universities did not award honorary degrees without scrutiny. Governors did not align with men of questionable character. Systems existed for a reason. And so Daniel returned to his routines. Morning briefings, strategy sessions, carefully worded statements. In the high-glass rooms of Aramore, nothing ever seemed to happen. But sometimes, late at night, when the house was silent and the city lights flickered beyond the curtains, Daniel would remember the way Victor had said the word inevitable. And he would wonder, quietly, almost guiltily, what kinds of outcomes were already unfolding beyond his sight. In a city built on reflection, it was difficult to tell where reality ended and its mirror began. Chapter 2, The First Crack. The disruption did not arrive like a storm. There were no sirens in the night. No urgent phone calls vibrating across Daniel Mercer's bedside table. No headlines splashed in red across the early morning news briefs. It arrived quietly, folded, sealed, anonymous. It was a Tuesday evening in late October when Daniel found the envelope. The governor's office had mostly emptied by then. Campaign season was intensifying and long days had become routine, but even so, by 8:30 the corridors were dim and hushed. Cleaning crews moved discreetly between offices. The hum of the building felt softer, like a machine winding down. Daniel had stepped out for a late strategy session with 2 policy advisors across the hall. When he returned to his office, he noticed it immediately, an ivory envelope resting against the base of his door. It had been slid underneath. He paused before picking it up. There was nothing written on the front except his name, Daniel Mercer. No title, no return address, no insignia. The paper felt heavier than standard stationery. Intentional. For a long moment, he stood there, listening to the quiet of the hallway, as though expecting someone to round the corner and claim it had been a mistake. No one did. He unlocked his office, stepped inside, and closed the door gently behind him. The room smelled faintly of paper and coffee. A desk lamp cast a cone of warm light across his workspace. Outside the tall windows, Aramore shimmered in orderly lines of illumination. He sat, then opened it. Inside were photocopied documents, emails printed from what appeared to be a private corporate account, contracts with dense legal language, financial transfer records routed through a series of limited liability companies. At first glance, they looked like ordinary executive paperwork, complicated but not unusual for large philanthropic organizations. Then he began to read. Subject lines included phrases like confidential, recruitment strategy, retention agreement, discretion clause, compliance expectations. He flipped through them slowly. Certain passages had been highlighted. Participant agrees to exclusive confidentiality regarding all activities conducted during private advisory sessions. Compensation adjusted upon continued cooperation. Non-compliance will result in financial penalties as outlined. His pulse began to thrum faintly in his ears. There were names listed in the margins. Several had been blacked out with thick marker. One remained visible. Lena Arcos. Tucked behind the contracts was a photograph. The image was taken at what looked like a private reception. Low lighting, marble floors, a background of floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the river at night. Victor Hale stood near the center of the frame, one arm resting at the small of a young woman's back. The woman, presumably Lena, was smiling, but the expression did not reach her eyes. There was a tension in her shoulders, a stiffness. Victor's smile, by contrast, was effortless. On the back of the photograph, written in deliberate block letters, "Ask about Lena Arcos." Daniel felt the air shift in the room, though nothing had physically changed. He stood and walked to the door, opening it quietly. The hallway remained empty. A vacuum hummed faintly in the distance. Back inside, he locked the door. He returned to the desk and read every page carefully. The language was careful, legal, not overtly criminal. But there was a pattern emerging: financial settlements categorized as consulting adjustments, travel reimbursements for executive retreats, supplemental payments contingent upon discretion. He knew how to read between lines. He had built a career on subtext. The clock on his desk read 9:17 p.m. For a fleeting second, he considered placing the documents back into the envelope and pretending he had never seen them. Anonymous accusations were dangerous. They could be fabricated, weaponized, politically motivated. And Victor Hale had enemies. But then he looked again at the photograph. There was something in the young woman's eyes. Not fear exactly. Resignation. Daniel slid the documents back into the envelope, turned off his desk lamp, and slipped the package into his leather briefcase. The drive home felt longer than usual. Traffic was sparse. Streetlights flickered rhythmically across his windshield. The bridge over the river stretched ahead, illuminated in steady white arcs. He found himself scanning his rearview mirror more frequently than necessary. At home, Elise was seated at the kitchen table with a stack of patient files, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. A mug of tea had gone cold beside her. "You're late," she said softly. "Strategy session ran long." She studied his expression. "You look different." He hesitated only briefly before removing the envelope from his briefcase and placing it on the table. "Something was left under my office door." Elise straightened slowly. She opened the envelope and began reading. Silence settled between them, thick and heavy. As she moved through the pages, her posture shifted, shoulders tightening, jaw setting. When she reached the photograph, she inhaled sharply. "She looks young," Elise said. "I thought so too." Elise turned the photograph over, reading the note. "Ask about Lena Arcos." They sat without speaking for several long moments. "Do you know her?" Elise asked. No. Do you think this is real? Daniel rubbed his temples. I don't know. It could be a smear campaign. It could be someone trying to destabilize funding. Or it could be something else. He met her eyes. Elise worked daily with survivors of manipulation and abuse. She recognized patterns that others missed. This language, she said, tapping the contracts. Exclusive confidentiality. Financial penalties. Discretion payments. That's not normal recruitment. It's not illegal either, Daniel replied automatically. She looked at him steadily. Is that the standard you're using? The question lingered. Upstairs, Nora's soft footsteps crossed her bedroom floor. Daniel lowered his voice. If this is true, if there's substance, it's not just about Victor. It implicates donors, politicians, institutions. That doesn't make it less true. He knew that. But knowing something and acting on it were separate decisions. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the office earlier than usual. He closed his door and searched for Lena Arcos in internal databases. Nothing recent. An employment record listing her as a junior program coordinator at Hale Global Initiatives 3 years prior. Resigned after 11 months. No public statements. No social media presence beyond outdated profiles. He checked voter records. Address history. A forwarding address in another state. That afternoon, during a planning meeting, Victor's name surfaced casually in conversation. He's hosting the infrastructure roundtable next week, one advisor mentioned. Private guest list. Daniel felt a flicker of unease. After the meeting, he stepped into an empty conference room and made a call. Mara Klein answered on the third ring. You only call when something's wrong, she said without greeting. I might have something, Daniel replied. There was a pause. How big? I'm not sure yet. They met that evening at a cafe far from the government district. It was small and narrow, with scratched wooden tables and a chalkboard menu listing seasonal soups. The kind of place where conversations blurred into ambient noise. Daniel handed her the envelope. Mara read in silence, her expression sharpening with each page. When she reached the photograph, she stared at it longer than the rest. I've heard whispers, she said finally. Recruitment events. Elite mentorship programs. Young professionals offered fast-track access. For what? Daniel asked. That's the question. She tapped the name on the back of the photograph. Lena Arcos. I'll find her. You need to be careful, Daniel said. Mara gave a faint, humorless smile. I'm always careful. As they left the cafe, the air had turned colder. Wind moved sharply between buildings. Daniel felt it then, not certainty, not proof, but a crack. A hairline fracture in the narrative he had accepted for years. Victor Hale, benefactor, advisor, patron. What if the rooms where nothing happened were not empty at all? Over the next week, Mara began digging quietly. She contacted former employees of Hale Global Initiatives. Most declined to speak. Some did not respond at all. One sent a brief message. I signed agreements. I can't discuss it. Another wrote, it's complicated. I have a family now. Patterns. Financial filings revealed settlement payouts labeled as consulting adjustments. Legal expenditures routed through firms known for aggressive defense strategies. Nothing overtly criminal. Everything strategically insulated. Late one evening, Mara called Daniel. I found her, she said. Lena? Yes. She's living under a slightly altered surname in a coastal town 2 states away. She agreed to meet. On what condition? That we don't bring attention. No recording devices. No formal statements yet. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. I'm coming with you. Are you sure? Mara asked. Once you step into this, there's no stepping back. He thought of Nora's small hand in his. Of Elise's steady gaze. I know. They drove out of Aramore before dawn 2 days later. The highway stretched long and gray ahead of them. The city receded in the rearview mirror, its skyline fading into haze. For the first time, Daniel felt distance from the infrastructure that had defined his professional life. Lena's apartment overlooked the ocean. It was modest, pale curtains, worn sofa, a narrow balcony facing restless water. The air inside carried the scent of salt and something faintly medicinal. She opened the door cautiously. She was smaller than Daniel expected. Her hair pulled back tightly. There was a stillness to her movements that felt practiced. They sat at a small table near the window. For several moments, no one spoke. Then Lena said quietly, You work for the governor. Daniel nodded. And you stand beside him, she added. Yes. She studied him carefully. You looked uncomfortable, she said. At the press conference last spring. Daniel felt a chill. What happened? Mara asked gently. Lena's gaze shifted to the ocean. It started with opportunity, she said. Internship. Mentorship. Access to rooms most people never see. Her voice was steady but thin. He noticed me early. Said I had potential. Invited me to private advisory sessions. Said discretion was part of leadership. Daniel's stomach tightened. There were retreats, she continued. Exclusive gatherings. Powerful men. Closed doors. She paused. I signed documents. They all did. Did what? Daniel asked quietly. Lena met his eyes. He doesn't threaten, she said. He isolates. He rewards. He makes you feel chosen. And then he makes you understand the cost of disappointing him. The ocean crashed faintly against rocks below. Why send this to me? Daniel asked. She hesitated. Because everyone knows, she whispered. But no one wants to be first. The words settled heavily in the small room. As they left the apartment later that morning, Daniel felt the crack widen. The narrative he had relied upon, that systems self-corrected, that institutions vetted carefully, began to erode. On the drive back to Aramore, rain streaked across the windshield. The city reappeared on the horizon hours later, steady and symmetrical. But Daniel no longer saw it the same way. Somewhere within its polished towers and velvet-lined rooms, something had been happening all along. And now he knew. Chapter 3, The Weight of Knowing. When Daniel returned to Aramore, the city looked unchanged. The skyline still cut clean lines against the sky. The river still moved with its patient, indifferent rhythm. Traffic still obeyed lights that shifted from red to green with mechanical certainty. Nothing had moved. And yet, for Daniel, everything had. Knowledge altered scale. It rearranged proportions. Buildings that once appeared impressive now felt hollow. Conversations that once sounded strategic now carried undertones he had never noticed before. He went back to work the next morning. The governor's office hummed with its usual energy, aides crossing corridors with folders tucked under their arms, phones ringing in measured intervals, printers humming out briefing packets. Daniel stepped into the building as he always had, swiping his badge against the security panel. The light blinked green. Access granted. He paused briefly in the lobby watching people pass. He wondered, irrationally perhaps, who among them knew, who had heard rumors, who had chosen not to ask questions. Inside his office, he closed the door and sat at his desk without turning on the light. He replayed Lena's voice in his mind. He doesn't threaten. He isolates. The memory was clear, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug, knuckles pale. The way she had stared at the ocean rather than at them. The way she had spoken carefully as if certain words still carried consequences. Daniel opened his laptop and began compiling notes. Not official notes. Not on any server connected to the administration. These were handwritten, stored in a slim black notebook he kept in the locked drawer of his desk. Patterns, dates, names, financial pathways. He wrote slowly, methodically. He had built a career on shaping narrative. Now he was mapping one. By midday he had 3 pages filled with careful script. He locked the notebook away and stepped into a strategy meeting already in progress. Victor Hale's name surfaced within the first 15 minutes. He's confirmed for next week's infrastructure summit, the chief of staff said. Private session beforehand. Select attendees. Daniel felt the familiar tightening at the base of his throat. Any concerns? Someone asked. No, the chief replied smoothly. Victor's support has been consistent. Consistent. The word echoed. Daniel observed the room. No one hesitated. No one raised objections. The machinery of governance moved forward seamlessly, lubricated by funding and influence. He wondered what would happen if he stood up and said Lena's name aloud. Would the room freeze? Or would it continue turning, simply adjusting to exclude him? After the meeting, the chief of staff called him aside. You've been quiet lately, she said, not unkindly. Busy, Daniel replied. She studied him. You've been asking questions about Hale. Routine due diligence. Her expression didn't shift, but something behind her eyes sharpened. Be careful, she said softly. There are alliances you don't fully see. He nodded. Alliances. It was a polite word for entanglement. That evening, Daniel met Mara again. They chose a different location this time. A public library reading room, open late, quiet but not isolated. Mara looked exhausted. Dark crescents shadowed her eyes. I've spoken to 3 more former employees, she said quietly. All variations of the same structure. Isolation, Daniel said. Yes. Exclusive retreats. Non-disclosure agreements layered with financial penalties. Settlement payouts categorized as consulting adjustments. Anyone willing to go on record? Not yet. Daniel exhaled slowly. They're afraid, Mara continued. Not of physical harm. Ruin. Legal annihilation. Reputation destruction. Victor didn't need to shout. He had lawyers. Mara slid a folder across the table. These are financial cross-references. Shell companies tied to Hale Global. Payments routed through subsidiaries that dissolve within 18 months. Daniel skimmed the documents. They're clean enough to survive surface audits, he observed. Yes, Mara agreed. But taken together, the pattern is deliberate. He leaned back in his chair. If we publish without airtight proof, he'll bury it, Daniel said. Mara met his gaze. If we don't publish, he continues. The library lights hummed faintly overhead. Daniel felt the weight settle more fully now. Knowing was not passive. Knowing demanded direction. At home, Elise sensed the shift before he spoke. You're carrying something, she said one night as they stood in the kitchen. He nodded. Is it him? She asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. Yes. She rested her hands against the counter, steadying herself. Daniel, this isn't just professional risk. I know. He has reach. I know. She stepped closer. And we have Nora. The name hung between them like fragile glass. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. I can't unknow it, he said quietly. Elise's voice softened. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to measure the cost. Later that night, Daniel checked the locks on every door twice. He told himself it was precaution. But when he stood at the living room window watching headlights pass on the street outside, he felt something unfamiliar. Vulnerability. 2 days later, he noticed the first sign. His car door was slightly ajar in the driveway when he left for work. Not wide open. Just enough to suggest it had been opened and closed without care. Nothing was missing. Nothing disturbed. A message without words. He did not mention it to Elise. Instead, he drove to work with heightened awareness, eyes flicking to mirrors, attention tuned to details he would once have dismissed. At the office, he found an internal memo awaiting him. Subject: Media Sensitivity Advisory. The message outlined anticipated hostile reporting regarding certain donors and advised staff to refrain from unsanctioned commentary. Victor's name was not mentioned. It didn't need to be. That afternoon, Daniel received a call from an unlisted number. He hesitated before answering. Daniel Mercer, he said evenly. A familiar voice responded. I hear you've been curious. Victor Hale. Daniel's pulse spiked, though his voice remained controlled. Curiosity is part of my job. A faint chuckle drifted through the line. Curiosity can be admirable, Victor said. It can also be destabilizing. Silence stretched between them. You've met with a journalist recently, Victor continued conversationally. Mara Klein. She has a reputation for ambition. Daniel did not confirm. You have a daughter, Victor said lightly. Nora. 8 years old. Bright child. The air left Daniel's lungs. That's not a threat, Victor added smoothly. Merely acknowledgement. We all have something precious. Daniel forced his voice steady. If you have something to say it directly. Victor paused. Power, he said quietly, is not about force. It's about understanding leverage. I would hate for unnecessary conflict to cause collateral discomfort. The line went dead. Daniel remained seated, phone pressed against his ear long after the call ended. His reflection stared back at him in the darkened office window. For the first time, the scale of what they were confronting felt fully visible. Victor was not defensive. He was confident. That confidence frightened Daniel more than anger would have. That evening, he told Elise about the call. She went pale. He mentioned Nora? Yes. Her composure fractured briefly. That's not leverage, she whispered. That's cruelty. Daniel reached for her hand. I won't let anything happen. But even as he said it, he understood the arrogance embedded in the promise. Mara called the next morning. I have something, she said. Proof? Context. Security footage from one of his private properties. Anonymous source. It doesn't show assault, but it shows enough. They reviewed it together in Mara's apartment. The footage was grainy but clear enough to identify faces. Young women escorted through a marble hallway by security personnel. Doors closing behind them. Hours later, Victor entering the same rooms. No audio. No visible violence. Just sequence. Pattern. Daniel felt nausea rise slowly. He's careful, Mara said. Always careful. Yes, Daniel replied. But this is architecture. The structure was undeniable now. Recruitment, isolation, discretion agreements, financial settlements, institutional protection. It wasn't rumor. It was systematized. Mara exhaled slowly. My editor is hesitant, she admitted. Hale funds investigative grants. Advertisers are entangled. Will she publish? Daniel asked. She says she needs more time. Time. Victor's greatest asset. Daniel returned home late that night. He stood in Nora's doorway watching her sleep. Her room was soft with lamplight and shadows shaped like constellations across the ceiling. He felt the weight of knowing more heavily than ever. Not just because of the crimes, but because of the network shielding them. Everyone knew. Board members, politicians, executives. They knew enough to suspect. But suspicion without action was comfort. And comfort was profitable. Daniel stepped back into the hallway. Elise waited there. Are we safe? She asked quietly. He hesitated. I don't know, he said. And that was the truth. Outside, Aramore shimmered in disciplined lines of light. The river reflected the city flawlessly as it always had. But beneath that reflection, currents moved unseen. Daniel understood now that justice was not automatic. Systems did not correct themselves. They corrected only when forced. And forcing them would require fracture. He returned to the living room and sat alone in the dark. The house was silent except for the steady ticking of the wall clock. He realized that the most dangerous moment was not exposure. It was the space between knowing and acting. Because once action began, consequences would follow. But until then, Victor Hale continued to move freely through the rooms where nothing ever seemed to happen. And Daniel Mercer sat in the quiet of his own home, carrying the unbearable weight of knowing exactly what did. Chapter 4, The Breaking Point. The story went live at 12:03 a.m. on a Sunday. Mara had not slept in 36 hours. Daniel had not slept either. They had reached the end of hesitation sometime around 9 the previous evening, when Mara's editor called with a final, strained warning. If we publish, we lose funding. We lose advertisers. We invite lawsuits that could shut us down. And if you don't? Mara had asked quietly. Silence. Then, you understand the cost. Yes, she said. I do. The call ended without blessing. So Mara did what journalists sometimes do when institutions falter. She built a new one overnight. A consortium of smaller investigative outlets agreed to publish simultaneously. Legal review was rushed but thorough. Testimonies were verified. Financial documents cross-checked. The security footage embedded carefully with context. No sensational language. No exaggeration. Just pattern. Just fact. At 12:03 a.m., the headline appeared. Philanthropist Victor Hale accused of systematic exploitation. Documents and testimonies reveal pattern of coercion. Daniel watched the page refresh on his laptop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the numbers began to climb. Shares, comments, notifications. Within 20 minutes, the story had been mirrored across platforms. By 1 a.m., it was trending nationally. Daniel closed the laptop. There was no taking it back. He stepped into the hallway and stood outside Nora's room, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. Elise approached quietly behind him. It's done? She asked. Yes. She nodded once, absorbing the word like a physical weight. They did not speak further. Outside, the city remained unaware, streetlights glowing, late-night traffic moving with habitual indifference. But somewhere in Aramore, phones were already lighting up. At 6:12 a.m., Daniel's began vibrating. Calls, messages, notifications stacking atop one another. He ignored them for 10 minutes, sitting at the kitchen table with untouched coffee. Finally, he answered. It was the governor's chief of staff. What have you done? She asked, voice tight but controlled. I told the truth, Daniel replied. You compromised the administration. No, he said quietly. Victor did. A long pause. You understand this implicates donors, policy initiatives, campaign funding. Yes. Are you a source in this article? Daniel hesitated. I won't discuss sourcing. Silence again. Don't come into the office today, she said finally. We'll be issuing a statement. The line went dead. By 8 a.m., news vans lined the streets outside Hale Global's headquarters. By 9, cable networks were dissecting the story panel by panel. Legal analysts debated the strength of the evidence. Political commentators speculated about fallout. Victor Hale issued a statement through his attorneys at 10:15 a.m. These allegations are categorically false and politically motivated. Mr. Hale has dedicated his life to philanthropic advancement and will vigorously defend his reputation. The words were measured, predictable. Daniel expected anger. Instead, he felt something closer to inevitability. By noon, 3 additional women had contacted the investigative consortium. By evening, 2 former executives resigned from Hale Global's board. The fracture had begun. But fractures cut both ways. At 7:40 p.m., Daniel stepped outside to retrieve the mail and found a black SUV idling at the corner of his street. It did not move when he looked at it. He stood there longer than necessary, memorizing its shape. Inside, Elise watched from the window. "We should go somewhere," she said quietly. "For a few days. Running makes it look like we're afraid. Aren't we?" Daniel didn't answer. That night, reporters began camping on the sidewalk. Flashbulbs flickered through the curtains. Nora pressed her face against the upstairs window until Elise gently pulled her back. "Why are they here?" she asked. "Because Daddy helped tell an important story," Elise said carefully. "Is it bad?" Elise smoothed her hair. "It's honest." The following morning, Daniel's suspension became official. Pending internal review. It was phrased as procedural neutral. He packed his office quietly. No one met his eyes as he left. Outside, a journalist shouted his name. "Mr. Mercer, did you knowingly leak confidential information? Mr. Mercer, are you alleging criminal activity by Victor Hale?" Daniel paused on the steps. He could feel cameras pointed at him, waiting. He thought of Lena. Of the ocean behind her apartment window. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." The statement detonated across networks within minutes. Victor responded that afternoon in person. He stood behind a podium in the lobby of his headquarters, flanked by attorneys. His suit was immaculate. His expression composed. "These accusations," he began, "are an orchestrated attack designed to dismantle meaningful reform. I will not be intimidated by opportunism disguised as journalism." He did not raise his voice. He did not appear shaken. Daniel watched the broadcast from his living room. For a fleeting moment, doubt flickered. Victor looked so certain, so steady. But then the footage aired again, security video now looping across screens nationwide. Doors closing. Hours passing. Victor entering. The visual repetition eroded certainty. By the 3rd day, federal authorities announced a preliminary inquiry. Investors began distancing themselves publicly. One senator issued a cautious statement supporting a full and transparent investigation. The tide was shifting. But tides are slow. On the 5th day, Daniel received another call from an unlisted number. He almost didn't answer. "You've made this messy," Victor said. Daniel's spine stiffened. "You did that yourself." A quiet exhale. "You misunderstand scale," Victor continued. "Do you believe exposure equals victory?" "No," Daniel replied. "I believe truth matters." Victor laughed softly. "Truth," he said. "Truth is contextual. You don't control it anymore." "Control?" Victor repeated, almost amused. "Control was never the objective. Influence is more durable." There was a pause. "You've placed your family in discomfort," Victor added. "I hope it was worth it." The line clicked dead. Daniel stared at the phone. He felt fear, sharp and immediate, but beneath it, something steadier. Resolve. 3 days later, arrest warrants were issued. They came at dawn. News helicopters hovered over Victor's penthouse tower as federal agents entered the building. Daniel watched live coverage, heart pounding. When Victor emerged in handcuffs, escorted between agents, he did not look down. He did not look panicked. He paused at the building's entrance. For a second, brief but unmistakable, his gaze lifted toward the cameras. Toward the city. Toward inevitability. Not anger. Not remorse. Disappointment. As if the machinery had failed him. Elise reached for Daniel's hand. "It's happening," she whispered. But even then, Daniel understood this was not the end. Arrest was not conviction. Exposure was not justice. The weeks that followed were a blur of depositions and sealed motions. More women came forward. Some anonymously. Some in person. Lena agreed to testify. Daniel attended the first day of hearings quietly, seated in the back of the courtroom. Victor entered in a dark suit, no longer impeccably tailored but still precise. Their eyes met briefly. Victor's expression held something new now. Not fear. Recognition. The proceedings unfolded slowly, methodically, evidence introduced, testimonies delivered, defense strategies deployed. Victor's attorneys attempted to dismantle credibility, to reframe agreements as consensual, to recontextualize payments as professional settlements. But patterns are stubborn, and the pattern was clear. One afternoon, Lena took the stand. The courtroom stilled. She spoke without theatrics, without embellishment. She described recruitment, isolation, pressure disguised as privilege. She described the cost of saying no. Daniel felt his throat tighten. Victor did not look at her. He stared forward, jaw set, hands folded. When cross-examination attempted to undermine her memory, she did not waver. "You're suggesting coercion," the defense attorney pressed. "I'm describing it," Lena replied calmly. The room exhaled. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered, some demanding accountability, others decrying a political witch hunt. Aramore was no longer calm. It was divided. Daniel felt the strain of it everywhere. Anonymous messages filled his inbox, some supportive, others venomous. At night, he double-checked locks. He drove alternate routes. He measured every unknown vehicle. The breaking point came not in a dramatic revelation, but in a quiet moment during closing arguments. The prosecution projected a timeline across the courtroom screen. Recruitment dates, retreats, payments, resignations. A pattern stretching back over a decade. 10 years. 10 years of rooms where nothing happened. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not rage, not triumph. Grief. For the years lost. For the women silenced. For the comfort that had shielded it all. The verdict arrived on a gray Thursday afternoon. Guilty on multiple counts of coercion, financial misconduct, and obstruction. The courtroom erupted, some in tears, some in stunned silence. Victor remained seated as the words settled. For the first time, his composure cracked. Not visibly, but subtly. A muscle tightening in his jaw. A breath held too long. Daniel did not feel victory. He felt release. As Victor was led away, the infrastructure that had supported him began collapsing publicly. Board members resigned. Foundations restructured. Political alliances distanced themselves. But Daniel knew the deeper truth. Victor had not operated in isolation. He had thrived in comfort, and comfort remained. That night, Daniel stood once more at his living room window. The reporters were gone. The street was quiet. Elise stood beside him. "Is it over?" she asked softly. He watched the river in the distance, reflecting fractured city lights. "No," he said. "It's just visible now." And visibility, he understood, was the first step toward anything resembling justice. Chapter 5. The Aftermath of Silence. After the verdict, the city exhaled. Not loudly, not dramatically, but perceptibly. The kind of collective breath people take when tension has stretched so long it becomes normal, and only when it releases do they realize how tightly they had been holding themselves. Aramore returned to its rhythms with surprising efficiency. Traffic resumed its steady hum across the bridges. Cafes filled with muted conversations about quarterly reports and school admissions. The river continued its patient movement, reflecting whatever the skyline chose to display. Victor Hale was transferred to a federal facility 3 states away. His name began disappearing from plaques. The hospital wing was renamed after a unanimous board vote. The Scholarship Foundation quietly rebranded. The university removed his honorary portrait from its ethics center, issuing a carefully worded statement about alignment with institutional values. It was astonishing how quickly permanence could be revised. Daniel watched it unfold with a kind of distant awareness. 4 months, his life had revolved around tension. Legal filings, media calls, strategy meetings whispered over coffee. Now there was space where urgency had been. And space, he discovered, was not entirely comforting. He did not return to the governor's office. The suspension became a resignation, framed diplomatically as a mutual understanding. There were no public accusations against him, but there were no reinstatements either. His role had become too visible, too controversial. Some colleagues sent private messages of support. Others did not reach out at all. Infrastructure recalibrated itself. Daniel began consulting independently, advising small nonprofit organizations on transparent communication strategies. The work was quieter, less prestigious, more deliberate. He chose clients carefully. Elise noticed the difference. "You're slower now," she said one evening as they prepared dinner together. "In a good way?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "In a conscious way." He smiled faintly. "Conscious? That was the word. For years, he had moved through rooms without questioning their foundations. Now he examined the floors beneath his feet. Nora adjusted more quickly than either of them had expected. Children understood headlines only in fragments. What remained for her was simple. Her father had told the truth and many people had been angry about it. At school, a classmate once asked if her dad was the man on TV who put someone in jail. Nora had thought about it carefully before answering. No, she had said. He just helped people talk. When she told Daniel that story, he felt something steady inside him. He had not put Victor Hale in prison. He had not delivered justice alone. He had only refused silence. That mattered. Still, consequences lingered. Invitations stopped arriving. Fundraisers no longer requested his presence. There were no more evenings on high balconies overlooking the river, no more strategic dinners under chandeliers. Instead, Daniel found himself attending community forums and modest auditoriums with flickering fluorescent lights. The audiences were smaller, the conversations more direct. One such forum took place on a rainy Tuesday night, 6 months after the sentencing. The topic was ethics and influence in public leadership. Daniel almost declined the invitation. He was tired of being framed as either whistleblower or disruptor. But Elise encouraged him. "You don't speak often," she said. "Maybe you should." The auditorium seated 80 people. 50 attended. The stage held 2 folding chairs and a small podium. Daniel sat beneath harsh lighting, hands folded loosely in his lap, listening to the moderator recount the events of the previous year in clinical language. When the floor opened for questions, there was a brief, uncomfortable silence. Then a young man in the third row stood. He looked barely older than 20. "How did he get away with it for so long?" he asked. The room stilled. It was the same question that had followed Daniel privately for months. He leaned forward slightly. "Because power doesn't hide in darkness," he said slowly. "It hides in comfort." The young man frowned faintly. "Comfort?" "Yes," Daniel continued. "In the benefits it provides. In the scholarships, the donations, the access. People don't question what sustains them. They rationalize it." He paused. "Everyone knew something," he added. "Not details. Not proof. But enough to suspect. And suspicion is easier to carry than responsibility." A woman in the back row spoke next. "Are you saying we're all complicit?" Daniel considered that carefully. "I'm saying silence is rarely neutral," he replied. "It protects something." After the forum ended, several attendees approached him quietly. Some thanked him. One older man shook his hand and said, "It takes courage." Daniel wasn't sure that was true. Courage suggested certainty. He had felt mostly fear. Weeks later, Mara visited for dinner. It was the first time she had come to their house since the trial ended. She looked different, thinner, sharper somehow. "You're famous in certain circles," she joked lightly as she set down a bottle of wine. "I'd prefer anonymous," Daniel replied. They ate slowly, conversation drifting between professional updates and ordinary life. Mara's reporting had continued, though cautiously. Funding had been restructured. Legal departments were more vigilant now. "Do you think it changed anything?" she asked at one point. Daniel understood the weight behind the question. "Some things," he said. "Not everything." Mara nodded. "That's the frustrating part," she admitted. "You expose one structure and you realize there are 10 more built the same way." "Yes," Daniel said softly. "But now we recognize the blueprint." Later that night, after Mara left, Daniel stepped outside onto the small back patio. The air was cool. The sky clouded. He could see the faint glow of the city beyond the trees. Aramore looked peaceful from a distance. He thought about Victor in a cell far away. He tried to imagine what filled Victor's days now. Regret? Anger? Self-justification? Daniel suspected it was the last. Men like Victor did not see themselves as villains. They saw themselves as architects, strategists, necessary forces in a flawed system. And perhaps that had been the most dangerous part. The following spring, Lena reached out. She had followed the trial closely but had kept distance afterward. They met again by the ocean. The wind was strong that day, whipping her hair loose from its tie. She looked different. Not healed, that word was too simple, but steadier. "I'm starting to speak publicly," she told him. Daniel felt a quiet admiration. "That's not easy." "No," she agreed. "But it feels less lonely now." They walked along the shoreline, waves breaking at their feet. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Being the one who stepped forward." Daniel thought of the SUV idling at the corner. the calls in the night, the lost career trajectory. Then he thought of Nora's answer at school. "No," he said finally. "I regret waiting as long as I did." Lena nodded slowly. "Everyone knew," she said again, almost to herself. "Yes," Daniel replied. "But no one wanted to be first." They stood in silence, watching the horizon blur where ocean met sky. Back in Aramore, the rooms where nothing happened still existed. New benefactors filled them. New alliances formed. Power did not disappear when one man fell. It reorganized. Daniel understood that now with painful clarity. Justice was not a destination reached once. It was maintenance. Constant. Uncomfortable. Necessary. On a quiet evening months later, Daniel sat alone in his living room, reviewing notes for a small workshop he would lead the next day on ethical communication practices. The house was still. Elise had taken Nora to a piano recital. Through the window, the river reflected city lights in fractured patterns. He remembered standing on Victor's balcony years ago, listening to him speak about inevitability. "Outcomes feel inevitable," Victor had said. Daniel understood something now that he hadn't then. Inevitability was manufactured. Silence was engineered. Comfort was curated. But disruption could be engineered too. So could truth. He closed his notebook and turned off the lamp. The room dimmed, leaving only the city's glow filtering through glass. Somewhere, in some high-rise room, powerful voices were speaking softly over polished tables. Somewhere, someone felt uneasy but said nothing. For now, Daniel stood and walked to the window. The river flowed on, reflecting light without judgment, carrying secrets and revelations alike. He understood that the world would never be entirely clean of men like Victor Hale. But he also understood something else. Everyone might know, but someone could always choose to speak. And sometimes that was enough to crack the silence.